Alabama fans, what is going on? We appreciate you guys joining us for today's show. I am your host, Chris Daughtery. This is the Alabama Football Report, and we're going to keep breaking down some of these depth charts for Alabama. It is the dead period for recruiting right now, so we're going to let some of that stuff play out. You know, there's been some commitments lately as well for Alabama, but we are going to break down Alabama's defensive line depth chart on today's show. And it's going to be pretty interesting, I think, to see what Alabama does along the defensive line this year with the Mboumoua defense. You know, there's going to be some more rotations as well, different kind of play style I think you'll see as well from this defensive line. But before we get into that today, if you guys have faith in Alabama's defensive line this year, make sure you like today's video. You know, I thought they played pretty well last year. You know, you had some times where, you know, especially towards the end of the season, they weren't so good against the run. But if you like today's video, I think Alabama's going to do a pretty good job against the run along that defensive line. So make sure you like today's video right now. This is somewhat how the defensive line depth chart, you know, works out for Alabama. Those twos are kind of a toss-up. We really don't know who the twos are necessarily. I think these are going to be your starters, though. Tim Smith, he's been in the program for, I think he's going on he's a fifth-year senior coming up this year. You know, Tim Keenan was pretty good for Alabama last year. Massive body right down there. And Alabama, they're only going to play two true, you know, big guys on that defensive line. And then you also have that new bandit position that Mboumoua likes, which is basically the defensive end. I think for Alabama, you know, Tim Smith, Tim Keenan are going to be your two starters for those two big guys on the defensive line. And then I think Jeheim Oatis is going to be the next guy in that rotation for Alabama. You know, maybe there's some games where Jeheim Oatis starts, but when it comes to those big guys, those are going to be your top three guys, I think. And then you've got a lot of talent that we'll break down a little bit more in as the backups. But that bandit position as well, you know, Jah-Marien Latham kind of broke out during the spring kind of as that top guy at the bandit position. You got LT Overton, who came over from Texas A&M in the transfer portal, and then former five-star from the 2024 class, I believe it was, 2024 or 2023. I think it was 2024. No, excuse me, 2023. I'm an idiot. Keon Keeley was in that 2023 class. Late flip from Notre Dame, another five-star. I'd really like to see him get on the field this year. I'd hate to lose a guy like that in the transfer portal because he is really good. But right there, I mean, at that bandit position, it's going to be a three-way race. When it comes to those top three starters, these are their career stats so far at Alabama. Tim Smith, he's played 50 games for Alabama. He's going to be, you know, your most veteran guy on that defensive line. And then Tim Keenan, 16 games played. And Jeheim Oatis, also 25 games played. He was banged up in the spring. He's banged up a little bit last year. So really would love to see him full and healthy on the field for Alabama. Thought he did really good in his freshman year. Last year, a little bit of a step back. But like I said, those injuries kind of hindered him a lot. And, you know, I'll be completely honest with you guys right here. I don't necessarily think Tim Smith is the best guy on that defensive line. I think James Smith, honestly, I think he's better. But he is your most experienced guy. He's going to be one of your top guys. You see in the 50 games right there, 89 tackles, 10.5 TFLs, 4.5 sacks. I mean, that's good. I'm not saying he's bad, but I don't think he is your best option there, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, for one of those top two spots on the defensive line. Some of your bandit candidates we talked about just a second ago. Keon Keeley redshirted last year. You know, didn't really get any playing time for Alabama. LT Overton came over from Texas A&M. He's played, you know, a good amount of snaps in 2 years at Texas A&M. 543 snaps for him, so he's got some solid playing time under his belt. And then Jah-Marien Latham, probably one of the top guys for that bandit position. He's only played 134 snaps, and he's been here for 4 seasons now. But you know, when you come to Alabama, there's so much talent. And Alabama's defensive line historically, especially in that Nick Saban era, was always really good. So it's always taken guys, you know, a long time to, be able to start on the defensive line. And then you have Jordan Renaud as well, played 12 snaps last year for Alabama. He's kind of going to be a sleeper, probably not in the race really for that Bandit position, but he's another candidate for that spot. So I want you guys to pick if tomorrow is the first game for Alabama. Who's going to start at that Bandit position? Type KK if you think it's going to be Keon Keeley, LT if you think it's LT Overton, or type JL if you think it's Jah-Marien Latham. It is the pinned comment on today's video. So if that ad comes on right here on YouTube, that's fine. Nobody cares about the ads anyways. Go down there to the pinned comment and reply for me right now. Some of the departures that you're going to be replacing, maybe not necessarily replacing. Really, Justin Mboumoua is the only one you are replacing. But, a couple of guys left in the transfer portal. Monkel Goodwin, somebody that I thought was going to be really good for Alabama. It's a shame. Transfers to South Carolina. Whatever. Go get that playing time, I guess. Anquan Barnes, he was a really good prospect coming out. But if there's anybody that I'm like, okay, whatever, that's fine, it's probably Anquan Barnes. Didn't really play much for Alabama. He transferred to Colorado. And then Justin Mboumoua. We'll talk about him more in a second. But, he played really, really well for Alabama last year. 657 snaps. That's going to be a guy. That's really the guy that you're going to have to replace along the defensive line. And then Isaiah Hastings, Curtis Perry, also guys that didn't really get to play much for Alabama. And they're really good, talented players. You hate to see them go, but when you're, 12, 13, guy on the depth chart and you're very talented, you want to play. And I understand that. So, Isaiah Hastings transferred to Syracuse. Curtis Perry transferred to Virginia Tech. We'll see you guys later. Good luck to you guys. But these are your departures for Alabama along the defensive line. And then back to Justin Mboumoua. He kind of had a rocky start for Alabama to start off the first 3 seasons, or really, he had one more season in 2019, but the last 4 seasons here, 2020, 2021, were he didn't really play a ton, really. And then 2022, we thought, man, that's going to be his breakout year for Justin Mboumoua. And then he got hurt, had that neck injury 4 games in, put him out the rest of the season. But last year, man, he really broke out for Alabama. 64 tackles, 11.5 TFLs, 7 sacks, in only 14 games for the Crimson Tide. Going back to that Tim Smith thing that I was talking about earlier, where I was like, he's not my favorite, to be honest with you guys. If you compare and contrast their stats, Justin Mboumoua had more tackles for loss last year than Tim Keenan has in his career. Justin Mboumoua had more sacks last year than Tim Keenan has in his career. And he only had 25 or so less tackles as well in a quarter of the amount of games. So Justin Mboumoua is going to be one of the biggest names that you're going to have to replace on the defensive line for Alabama this year. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they take advantage of that and get guys in position to make plays. Make sure you guys go check out Fanatics. Go get some NFL jerseys from former Alabama players. They've got J.C. Latham. They've got Kool-Aid McKinstry. They've got Dallas Turner, Tyrion Arnold. Any of those guys that you are fans of that, possibly are on your NFL team that you guys root for, you can get their jerseys. Just go to chatsports.com/NFL jerseys. That link will be in the description and the comments of today's video. Some of your sleepers along the defensive line. I talked about James Smith. I think he's a guy that, possibly by the end of the year, maybe he could carve out a starting role for Alabama. 5-star recruit in that 2025 class, number 26 overall, the number 2 defensive lineman. And then Hunter Osborne, another really, really talented kid. He was a 4-star as well in that 2023 class, number 20 defensive lineman. Damon Payne Jr., you want to talk about a loaded defensive line class in 2021. Ranked number 24 overall. He's a 5-star, but he was ranked the number 7 defensive lineman. You look over to James Smith, he was ranked lower by 2 spots, but he was the number 2 defensive lineman in that 2023 class. So an insane defensive line class coming out in 2021 that Damon Payne Jr. was a part of. And then you got guys like Jordan Renaud and Edric Hill, who could also carve out some roles maybe, later in the year, whether that's going in, rotating in with the 2s, rotating in with the 3s. I think James Smith is probably your biggest, candidate to really get in and make some playing time for himself in regular, games, not necessarily blowout games. He's my biggest sleeper, if you will, on the defensive line. It's good in the comments section for me right now, guys. Who do you guys think is the biggest sleeper on the defensive line for Alabama? Let me know right now in the comments section. Alabama brought in some pretty decent, freshmen in last year's class as well. Jeremiah Beaman, he's a guy that I really like a lot. He's super strong, really fast, heavy hands off the ball. He was a top 100 recruit in this past year's class, 13 defensive linemen. And then you got guys like Isaia Faga and Steve. I don't think anybody necessarily knows how to say his last name, to be honest with you guys. He is from Canada, so, he's French-Canadian up there, but, a decent defensive line class that Nick Saban was able to bring in. And, I said it before, if Kalen DeBoer brought this defensive line class in, there would be some negative comments, I think, in the comments section, but I think all these guys are very talented for Alabama. Bringing it back full circle here to Alabama's defensive line group, I think you really got a big season ahead for Tim Keenan and Jeheim Oatis as well. And I'm very excited to see what Alabama does at that bandit position. I think that is the biggest question mark, if you will, for Alabama along the defensive line. Make sure you guys are subscribed right here to the Alabama Football Report. We've got so much content ahead for you guys, and I'm so excited for those watch parties that we'll be doing as well. And just a heads up as well, we will be giving away a Jalen Milroe jersey during those watch parties. So make sure you guys are subscribed right here to the Alabama Football Report, and we'll see you guys next time.